Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone who thinks they are better than you simply because they have a higher balance in their bank account? It's a cold, hollow feeling, isn't it? For those of us who have spent decades building our lives through sweat, patience, and integrity, there is nothing more insulting than the smirk of unearned privilege. Today, we are stepping into a courtroom where that smirk finally met a mirror held by a woman who has spent over 25 years exposing lies with a single stare, Judge Judy. Look at the man standing to the right. His name is Elias Vance. He's 72 years old. If you look closely at his face, you see the physical map of a life well lived. The deep lines etched around his eyes aren't just wrinkles. They are stories of 4,000-hour shifts at the local post office, of raising 3 children on a modest salary, and of the quiet, stubborn pride that comes from never taking a shortcut. His hands are thick, his knuckles a bit swollen from years of carrying the weight of his community's mail in the freezing rain and the scorching sun. He represents everything that made this country strong: resilience, duty, and respect. He is the personification of the quiet American. Now, look at the woman to the left, Chloe Vanderbilt, 24 years old. She looks like she stepped off the cover of a high-fashion magazine, but look closer at her human face. There's a restlessness in her eyes, a lack of depth that only comes from a life where she has never had to wait for anything, let alone earn it. Her skin is flawless, pampered by treatments that cost more than Elias's monthly pension. She isn't just standing there, she's vibrating with a toxic kind of impatience. To her, this courtroom isn't a house of justice, it's a smudge on her social calendar, an annoying interruption to her content creation lifestyle. The case seemed simple on paper, but heartbreaking in reality. Chloe had driven her custom-painted SUV, a gift for her birthday, straight through Elias's front yard, destroying a commemorative rose garden he had hand-planted in honor of his late wife, Martha. These weren't just flowers. They were the last living connection Elias had to the woman he loved for 50 years. Chloe didn't stop. She didn't apologize. In fact, when Elias tried to approach her car that night, she didn't even roll down the window. She just pointed at her lawyer's card and drove off. But today, there are no people to hide behind. There are no social media filters to blur the truth. There is only the wooden bench, the cold facts, and the sharpest tongue in the American legal system. As Judge Judy looked down at the police report, the silence in the room became heavy, almost suffocating. You could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner and the steady, rhythmic breathing of Elias, who sat with his hands folded, waiting for a sign that his life still mattered. Judge Judy looked up, her eyes locking onto Chloe. She asked a simple, piercing question. "Young lady, do you have even the slightest inkling of the damage you've caused to this man's peace of mind?" Chloe didn't even look at Elias. She didn't look at the photos of the ruined garden. She sighed audibly, adjusted her $5,000 handbag on the table, and uttered the words that would change the course of her life forever. "Does it really matter? I mean, come on, you're just a TV judge anyway. Why are we pretending this is a real court?" The court reporter's hands froze over the keys. Bird, the bailiff, looked up from his paperwork, his expression shifting from boredom to disbelief. And for the first time in a decade, Judge Judy didn't say a word for a full 10 seconds. She just stared at the young woman who had just signed her own legal and social death warrant. If you believe that respect is a currency that never loses its value, and that arrogance eventually comes with a price tag no one can afford, stay with me. Because what happens next isn't just a ruling, it is the ultimate takedown of a generation that forgot how to say "I'm sorry." The silence in the courtroom wasn't just quiet, it was heavy, like the air right before a tornado touches down. Have you ever seen a person so consumed by their own reflection that they can no longer see the humanity in others? That is what we were looking at. Judge Judy slowly leaned back, her lace collar stark against her black robe. She didn't scream. She didn't bang her gavel. Instead, she did something much more terrifying. She smiled a thin, razor-sharp smile that never reached her eyes. "You think this is a set, Miss Vanderbilt?" Judy's voice was a low, dangerous hum. "You think these walls are made of plywood and these feelings are scripted? Let me disabuse you of that notion right now. This bench isn't just wood, it is the weight of the law. And that man sitting there, the one you didn't even bother to look at his pain, is the only real thing in this room. Now, I want you to look at Chloe's face during this moment. If you understand the language of the body, you can see the cracks. Notice how she tilts her chin up, exposing her neck in a false display of confidence? That is the classic sign of someone who uses arrogance as armor because they are terrified of being seen as ordinary. Her eyes kept darting to the back of the room, looking for a camera, a fan, a follower, anyone to validate her existence. She has lived so long in a world of likes and shares that she has forgotten how to handle a reality where she is the villain. Contrast that with Elias. As Chloe spoke those hateful words, Elias didn't react with anger. He looked down at his weathered hands, and for a split second, they trembled. Not from fear, but from the sheer exhaustion of having his entire life dismissed as insignificant. Can you feel that? The pressure point of dignity? For someone like Elias, who has worked 40 years to be a somebody through his actions, being told his life is a pretend court is the ultimate betrayal. Judge Judy reached for a manila folder. "Bird, let's show Miss Vanderbilt a little streaming content," she didn't post on her Instagram. The monitor flickered to life. This was the Ring camera footage from Elias's neighbor, captured at 11:14 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday. The quality was grainy, but the story it told was crystal clear. You see the headlights of a white SUV, Chloe's SUV, speeding down a quiet residential street. There was no brake light, no hesitation. The vehicle veered off the road, the tires screaming as they tore through the pristine white picket fence and plowed straight into the center of the garden. On the screen, you could see the roses, Elias's Martha roses, being crushed under 2 tons of metal. These weren't just plants. Martha had spent 30 years crossbreeding these specific roses to get that perfect shade of deep crimson. When she passed, they became Elias's living sanctuary. Every morning at 6 a.m., he was out there talking to them, pruning them, keeping her memory alive through the soil. In the footage, the SUV stopped. The driver's side door opened just an inch. You could see the glow of a cell phone from inside the car. Chloe didn't get out to check on the house. She didn't check to see if she had hit a person. She sat there for 45 seconds, just long enough to check her own reflection in the rearview mirror, and then she backed up, crushing the remaining blooms, and sped away into the darkness. The video ended. The courtroom was silent again. Judge Judy looked at Chloe, whose face had finally begun to pale. "You see that, Miss Vanderbilt? That wasn't a plot point. That was a man's heart being run over by your vanity. And you didn't even have the decency to put down your phone. If you've ever felt the sting of someone destroying something you love and acting like it was no big deal, then you know why Judge Judy's eyes were glowing with a righteous fire. This was no longer a civil suit. This was a reckoning. Have you ever noticed that people who have never had to work for their money often think it's a magic wand that can make any sin disappear? They treat life like a vending machine. If you break something, you just put in a few more coins and walk away. But in this courtroom, the currency isn't paper, it's character. And Chloe Vanderbilt was about to find out that her bank account was overdrawn in the only department that mattered. As the video of the crushed garden faded from the screen, Chloe didn't look remorseful. Instead, she looked bored. She reached into her designer bag, pulled out a gold-trimmed checkbook, and clicked an expensive pen. "Look," she said, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that made the skin crawl. "I get it. The flowers are dead. It's sad. How much were they? A couple of thousand? I'll write a check for 5,000 right now, double what they're worth if we can just wrap this up. My flight to Aspen is in 3 hours." The sound of that pen clicking was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Elias Vance flinched. To him, that checkbook wasn't an offer of help. It was a final insult to Martha's memory. It was Chloe saying that 30 years of love and labor could be settled like a bar tab. Judge Judy didn't move. She didn't reach for the check. She just stared at Chloe's hands. If you look at Chloe's fingers in this moment, you'll see the physiognomy of privilege. Her movements are fast, dismissive, and entirely disconnected from the person standing 5 feet away from her. She isn't looking at Elias. She's looking at her own signature. This is the pressure point of arrogance, the belief that everyone has a price. "Put that pen down, Miss Vanderbilt," Judy said, her voice dropping to a register that signaled a coming storm. "Put it down, or I'm going to have Mr. Bird take it from you and keep it as a souvenir of the day you lost your mind." Chloe froze, her pen hovering over the paper. "I'm trying to be fair." "Fair?" Judy interrupted, leaning so far over the bench she was nearly nose to nose with the young woman. "You wouldn't know fair if it sat on your lap and sang the Star-Spangled Banner. You think you're paying for flowers? You aren't paying for flowers, you arrogant child. You are being sued for the destruction of a man's peace. You are being sued for the time he spent on his knees in the dirt, tending to a memory you ran over because you were too busy looking at your own filtered face on a screen." Judge Judy turned to Elias. Her eyes softened, a rare glimpse of the empathy she hides behind her sharp exterior. "Mr. Vance, tell me, when you saw her car in your garden that night, and she wouldn't even roll down the window, what did you feel?" Elias stood up slowly. He didn't look at Chloe. He looked at Judge Judy. "Your Honor," he said softly. I didn't want her money. I just wanted her to see what she did. Those roses. Martha and I planted the first one the day we moved in, 45 years ago. I talk to them every morning. It's how I tell her I'm still here. When this young lady drove off, she didn't just break a fence. She made me feel like I didn't exist, like my wife's memory was just trash in the way of her car. This is the heart of the impact strategy I told you about. We aren't talking about property damage. We are talking about the pressure point of significance. To a man who has lived 72 years, being told he doesn't matter is a wound that money cannot heal. Judge Judy turned back to Chloe, and this time, the fire in her eyes was cold. You hear that, Miss Vanderbilt? He doesn't want your $5,000. And lucky for him, I'm not going to let you buy your way out of this. You think you're just a TV judge's defendant? No, dear, you are a lesson in progress. And the tuition for this lesson is about to get very, very expensive. Have you ever wondered what people say about you when they think you aren't listening? In the world of social media, privacy is a myth. But for someone like Chloe Vanderbilt, the need to be seen is a hunger that overrides common sense. She thought she could hide behind a screen, but today, her own vanity was about to become the evidence that sealed her fate. Judge Judy adjusted her glasses and looked at the bailiff. Bird, let's show the court what Miss Vanderbilt was doing while Miss Vance was sitting in his darkened living room, staring at a ruined garden and crying for his late wife. A new image appeared on the courtroom monitor. It was a screenshot from Chloe's private close friend's story on Instagram, posted at 1:30 a.m. on the night of the accident. In the photo, Chloe is seen holding a glass of champagne, laughing, with a caption that read, "Just had a little off-roading adventure in the suburbs, lol. Some old guy's weeds got in the way of my tires. R.I.P. to his garden, but my SUV is fine. Blessed number can't stop me." The courtroom went from heavy silence to a collective gasp. Elias Vance looked at the screen, and for the first time, he didn't look sad, he looked horrified. To see his 30 years of devotion to Martha's memory referred to as weeds was a blow more violent than the car crash itself. Look at your Chloe's face now. This is what we call the collapse of the mask. Notice how her hand flew to her throat? That is a subconscious protective gesture, the body's attempt to shield itself when a devastating truth is revealed. Her eyes weren't darting anymore. They were fixed on that screen, watching her own words destroy her luxury brand in real time. Is this your account, Miss Vanderbilt? Judge Judy's voice was as cold as a winter morning in the Yukon. Chloe stammered, her artificial sweetness finally curdling. I was just joking. It's just social media. It's not real life. My followers expect a certain vibe. I didn't mean anything by it. Not real life? Judy leaned in, her gavel resting in her hand like a weapon. Tell that to the soil. Tell that to the man who spent his life protecting this country and his family while you were busy vibe-checking your way through a criminal act. You didn't just hit his garden. You mocked his grief for engagement. You used his tragedy as a prop for your narcissism. This is the pressure point of shame. For our generation, the 50 to 80-year-olds who believe that a person's word is their bond and that private character should match public face, this is the ultimate sin. To mock an elder's pain for the amusement of strangers is a level of moral bankruptcy that no amount of Aspen money can fix. Judge Judy turned to Elias. Mr. Vance, did you know she was laughing about your garden while you were trying to fix your fence that night? Elias shook his head slowly, his voice thick with emotion. No, Your Honor. I thought maybe she was just scared. I thought maybe she was a young person who made a mistake and didn't know what to do. I didn't know I was a joke to her. That sentence, "I didn't know I was a joke to her," is the heart of the impact strategy. It reveals the profound disconnect between a life built on service and a life built on surface. Elias represents the real America, and Chloe represents the filtered illusion. Judge Judy turned back to Chloe, and this time, she didn't just look furious, she looked disgusted. You called me a TV judge earlier, Miss Vanderbilt. Well, let me tell you something. On TV, I have to be civil. In my heart, I am wondering how someone can be raised with so much money and so little soul. You think your life is a movie? Well, the credits are about to roll on your arrogance. Have you ever noticed how the word sorry has become an extinct species in the vocabulary of the entitled? For those of us who grew up in an era where you looked a person in the eye, shook their hand, and took ownership of your mess, watching someone like Chloe Vanderbilt try to spin the truth is like watching a car fire in slow motion. You want to look away, but the sheer lack of shame keeps you glued to the screen. Chloe's lawyer, a man in a suit that cost more than Elias's car, tried to lean into the microphone. Your Honor, my client is under a lot of stress. Her social media brand is her livelihood, and this unfortunate incident has caused her significant mental anguish. Anguish? Judge Judy's voice cut through the air like a guillotine. You want to talk to me about anguish? Anguish is waking up at 72 years old and realizing that the flowers you planted with your dying wife are now compost under the tires of a spoiled brat who was too busy vibing to see a red light. Anguish is not having your follower count drop because you're a narcissist. Sit down, counselor, before I find you in contempt for wasting my oxygen. Now, look at the physiognomy of defeat on Chloe. For the first time, her chin isn't tilted up. Her shoulders are hunching forward, a classic defensive posture seen in animals when they realize they are no longer the predator. The pressure point here is shame. She isn't ashamed of what she did to Elias. She is ashamed that she is being treated like an ordinary person. She is realizing that her money hasn't bought her a get-out-of-jail-free card. It has only bought her a front-row seat to her own public dismantling. Miss Vanderbilt, Judy continued, her eyes narrowed to slits. You said earlier that I'm just a TV judge. Well, let's talk about that. Being on television doesn't make the law fake. It makes the truth louder. It means that millions of people like Mr. Vance, people who work hard, pay their taxes, and respect their neighbors, are watching you right now. They are seeing the vacuum where your soul should be. Judge Judy picked up a heavy law book and slammed it onto the bench. The sound made Chloe jump. You think you're blessed? You aren't blessed. You're lucky. You're lucky that Mr. Maybetter, Vance is a better person than you are, because if it were me, I wouldn't be suing you for $5,000. I'd be suing you for every ounce of peace you stole from my golden years. This is the next level strategy we talked about, moving from the crime to the character. To our audience, the 50 to 80-year-olds who value the social contract, Judge Judy is speaking their language. She is saying what everyone at home is screaming at their screens: wealth does not give you the right to be a monster. Judge Judy looked at Elias, then back at Chloe. You tried to buy him off with a check. You tried to mock him on the internet. But you forgot one thing, Miss Vanderbilt. In this room, I don't care about your vibe. I care about the fact that you destroyed a man's heart and laughed about it. And I'm about to make sure that laugh is the most expensive sound you've ever made. Have you ever wondered what happens when a person who lives for the applause of strangers suddenly finds themselves standing in a room full of silence? For Chloe Vanderbilt, her social media following was her shield. It was the wall she built to keep reality at bay. But Judge Judy doesn't just knock down walls. She dismantles them brick by brick until there is nowhere left to hide. Miss Vanderbilt, Judge Judy said, her voice dropping to a whisper that felt more powerful than a shout. You seem very concerned about your followers. You're worried that this TV judge is going to ruin your aesthetic. Well, let me help you with your content for today. Bird, hand me the file on the vehicle's registration. As Judy flipped through the papers, notice the change in Chloe's posture. This is the physiognomy of guilt. When a person is caught in a lie that involves their status, they often perform micro-gestures of self-soothing, touching their hair, adjusting their expensive jewelry, or blinking rapidly. Chloe was doing all of them. She was no longer the socialite. She was a cornered child. It says here, Judy continued, a smirk finally appearing on her face, that this SUV isn't even in your name. It's registered to a Vanderbilt Holdings LLC, and according to the insurance claim you filed the morning after you ran over Mr. Vance's memories, you told them you hit a stationary object in a parking lot to avoid a premium hike. That's not just a vibe, Miss Vanderbilt. That's insurance fraud. The gasp in the courtroom was audible. Elias Vance looked up, his eyes widening. He had lived his life paying every bill on time, being honest even when it hurt. To him, the idea of lying to an insurance company was as foreign as flying to the moon. This is the pressure point of integrity. While Elias built his life on a foundation of truth, Chloe's life was a house of cards built on deception. Judge Judy leaned forward, the shadows of the bench making her look like an ancient statue of justice itself. Here is my ruling. First, I am awarding Mr. Vance the maximum judgment of $5,000. But we aren't stopping there. Because you are so fond of your digital audience, I am ordering you to film a public apology right here, in this hallway, before you leave this building. You will look into your own camera, and you will read the transcript of what you said about Mr. Vance's weeds. You will tell your followers exactly how much of a coward you were that night. Chloe's mouth dropped open. You can't make me do that. That will ruin my sponsorship deals. I can't? Judy chuckled, a sound that sent chills down the spines of everyone in the room. Miss Vanderbilt, you insulted this court. You insulted a veteran, and you lied to your insurance company. If you don't post that video within 24 hours, I will personally refer this case to the district attorney for a full investigation into your business filings. Now, you have a choice. Lose your brand or lose your freedom. Which is it? This is the ultimate takedown strategy. Judge Judy didn't just take her money, she took her power. She forced Chloe to use the very tool she used to mock Elias her social media to humiliate herself. For the 50 to 80-year-old audience watching at home, this is the definition of instant regret. It is the moment where the digital bully is forced to face the physical truth. As Chloe sat back down, her face was no longer pale. It was beet red with a mixture of fury and shame. She looked at Elias, and for the first time in the entire trial, she actually saw him. She saw the man she had tried to erase, and in that moment, the TV judge had become the most real thing she had ever encountered. Have you ever seen a mirror break in slow motion? First, there is one sharp crack, and then, piece by piece, the image it holds becomes distorted until it is unrecognizable. As Judge Judy finished her ruling, that is exactly what happened to Chloe Vanderbilt. The image she had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to curate, the fearless, untouchable, wealthy socialite, was lying in shards on the courtroom floor. I'm not finished with you yet, Miss Vanderbilt, Judge Judy said, her voice cutting through Chloe's quiet sobbing. You think the tragedy here is your sponsorships. You think the disaster is that people might finally see who you really are. But the real tragedy is that you had to be dragged into a court of law to realize that another human being's heart has value. Look at the contrast in the room. This is the physiognomy of truth. Elias Vance sat perfectly still. His back was straight, not out of arrogance, but out of a lifetime of discipline. His eyes, once clouded with grief, now held a glimmer of peace. He didn't look at Chloe with hatred. He looked at her with a profound, quiet pity. On the other side, Chloe was literally shrinking. Her expensive silk blouse was wrinkled, her meticulously styled hair was falling into her face, and her makeup was streaked with tears that weren't for Elias, but for herself. Mr. Vance, Judy said, turning away from the wreckage of Chloe's ego, I know $5,000 won't bring back the roses you planted with Martha. I know it won't erase the night you spent wondering why a stranger would treat your life like a speed bump, but I hope it reminds you that in this country, your story still matters more than her vibe. Elias stood up. He didn't look at the checkbook Chloe's lawyer was frantically filling out. He looked at Judge Judy and gave a small, respectful nod. Your Honor, he said, his voice steady for the first time today. I'm going to use this money to build a new fence, a stronger one, and I'm going to plant a new batch of Martha roses. But this time, I'm going to invite the neighborhood kids to help me. I want them to see that when something beautiful gets broken, you don't just cry over it, you roll up your sleeves and start again. This is the pressure point of resilience. To our audience, the builders, the veterans, the mothers who sacrificed everything, this is the moment they've been waiting for. It's the realization that while Chloe has followers, Elias has a community. While she has content, he has a legacy. Judge Judy's eyes softened in a way that only happens once in 100 episodes. You're a good man, Mr. Vance. A very good man. Bird, please escort Mr. Vance out through the private exit. I don't want him to have to deal with the paparazzi this young lady likely called for herself. But as Elias walked out, something happened that no one expected. Chloe reached out a hand, almost as if to stop him. For a split second, the socialite was gone, and there was just a terrified girl who realized she was completely alone in her vanity. She opened her mouth to speak, but Elias didn't stop. He didn't look back. He had already moved past her, back into a world of real sun, real soil, and real memories. And as for you, Miss Vanderbilt, Judy snapped, her empathy for Elias instantly turning back into iron for Chloe. You have 24 hours to post that apology. I'll be watching. And believe me, I have a very long memory. Have you ever noticed that the loudest noise in the world isn't a shout, but the sound of a reputation hitting the floor? We live in an era where people think they can delete their mistakes with a click of a button. They think that if they ignore the wreckage they leave behind, it simply ceases to exist. But as Chloe Vanderbilt stepped out of Judge Judy's courtroom and into the blinding light of the afternoon, she realized that some stains don't wash off, not even with the most expensive soap in the world. 24 hours later, the video appeared. It wasn't the high glamour, filtered content her followers were used to. Chloe stood in front of a plain white wall, her eyes red, her voice trembling. She didn't use a ring light. She didn't use a soundtrack. She read the words Judge Judy ordered her to read. She admitted to calling a veteran's memories weeds. She admitted to lying to her insurance company. She admitted that she had been a small person in a big suit. The instant regret was complete. Within minutes, the unfollow count began to spin like a hijacked odometer. Sponsors pulled out. Her luxury brand was revealed for what it truly was: an empty shell fueled by the disrespect of others. This is the pressure point of social death. For someone like Chloe, losing her audience was a punishment far more painful than the $5,000 check. She was forced to live in the one thing she feared most, a reality where she was irrelevant. But let's look away from the wreckage and toward the light. 3 months later, if you were to drive past a certain small house in the suburbs, you wouldn't see a broken fence or a scarred lawn. You would see Elias Vance. But he isn't alone anymore. Every Saturday morning, 3 neighborhood teenagers are there with him. He's teaching them how to prune the Martha roses. He's telling them stories about the woman who loved them first, and in doing so, he's planting more than just flowers. He's planting character in the next generation. He used the settlement money not just for wood and nails, but to build a bridge to the community he had served for 40 years. Look at Elias's face in the golden hour of the afternoon. This is the physiognomy of peace. The lines on his face are no longer etched with the tension of grief. They are softened by the joy of a legacy that continues. He proved that you don't need 1 million followers to be significant. You just need to be a person of your word. As Judge Judy often says, if you tell the truth, you don't have to have a good memory. Chloe Vanderbilt will spend the rest of her life trying to outrun her own reflection. But Elias Vance? He can look in the mirror every single morning and see a man who stood his ground, kept his dignity, and turned a moment of destruction into a lifetime of growth. If you believe that money should never be a license to be cruel, and that the quiet strength of a good man is worth more than all the likes in the world, then this story was for you. Justice wasn't just served today, it was grown from the ground up.